And hello to everyone. Andrew, hello and welcome to the stream. And Gazian, Salih, welcome to the stream. Hoş geldiniz. Merhabalar. Andrew, I presume this is your first virtual time in Turkey. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yes, Merhaba, thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate you letting me do this Q&A in English. As an ignorant American, I only speak the one language, so I really appreciate it.
Well, you know the very famous saying, the language of love, and is the universal in the world. But I guess at this time is the language of Flutter. So Dart is very universal. So I presume people, if they have a bit of a problem, they might be actually asking you questions in Darts. Well, maybe that could be an interesting bonus for people. And thanks for being here. And Salih, Gazian, sizler hoş geldiniz. Bahsettiğim gibi biraz önce kendileri Google Developer Expert, Google Developer Expert Flutter ve Dart konusunda ve Andrew'a yardımcı olacaklar. So Andrew, Salih and Gazian are your Flutter force, very peaceful, helping you with this stream. So I will leave you three the stage, and thanks again on behalf of all the communities in Turkey and all the Flutter aficionados who are very, very eager to ask you questions and listen to what you've got to say. Thank you for putting some time aside for us. We really do appreciate it.
I'm very, very happy to be here. Nilay told me about this opportunity, and I basically do whatever she tells me to do. So here I am.
Fantastic.
I thought you were the manager.
Most definitely. So all the very best with the Q&A session, and I will see you sometime at the end.
Thank you.
I have a super weird bug.
All right, so we got a microphone problem, but I think it's okay now. Okay.
Yep. We are solving a few technical issues.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's super weird. I hear Gazihan, I hear Inter, but I don't hear Andrew, which is super weird.
Really? Andrew, can you talk a little bit?
Sure. Hopefully you can both hear me at this point.
Yes, I can.
Am I coming through?
That's super weird. Okay, let me try to refresh it.
Okay. In the meantime, Andrew, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you on behalf of Turkish Flutter enthusiasts. Thank you so much for taking time to answer our questions.
I'm just standing in for Salih at the moment. We've got a bit of a microphone problem, but thankfully, obviously, we got a backup system over here. So I will try and help you with the questions. But obviously, the expert is here. Obviously, besides yourself.
That's my kid knocking on the door. Sorry.
A minute ago, I just went up and locked my own door. I have a 3-year-old daughter who loves to interrupt live streams. So if you see a small child run behind me, please say something.
Okay.
Andrew, I believe that there's a bit of a noise in the microphone, and it might be originating from you. So can we ask you just to check your infrastructure for the time being? Your headphones that you're using, they might be just moving about.
Okay.
Yep, it looks like right now. Yeah, right now it is fantastic. It looks like
I don't hear it
clear as a
anymore.
bell. Perfect. Very good.
Excellent.
And we are now back in line with all the infrastructure problems solved.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, finally. Yeah. I was super happy to hear your voice right now, and yeah. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So, are we going to start now? Shall we go with the live questions or something?
Yeah. Before that, I'd like to say, so in the 2 hours before you, Andrew, we had like 6 short talks about recent developments in Flutter. Some of them directly related to the 2-day, Flutter Day event. So. There was the Flutter CodePen stuff. There was Flutter DevTools, null safety. We had a talk about that too. So we are really excited about these new developments. And I'd like to take your opinions on them. Like, what do you think about the new stuff?
So which new stuff would you like me to start with? There's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited about null safety. So maybe you can tell us, why is it important?
Sure. So I've been working a lot myself with null safety, making sure that we're going to have our resources updated and we have the right tools to help people get started with it. So null safety is really exciting to me for two reasons. One is that it will enable everybody who codes with Dart, including Flutter developers, to write better code more quickly, right? So there's a huge class of errors that are null pointer errors and null reference exceptions that we all run into with languages that allow null. And so by having a language, having null safety where you can declare, this variable can be null, this one cannot, it will never, ever, ever be null. That allows you to cut out a whole continent of possible errors that you might code into your app, right? Often very subtle bugs where like something that you didn't expect to return null did, and like 3 function calls later, that null pops out and blows up your program, right? And with null safety, that can't happen. You can say this variable will never be null, therefore the function that's going to get it, that knows it's never going to be null, and you don't run into those sorts of issues. So it's gonna help people code a lot more reliable programs. It'll also, we think, improve the APIs people use. You have to think a little bit differently when it's like, oh, this could be null and might not. There's no way for me to say that. Versus with null safety, you have to think like, should this ever return null? Is that a valid value to be coming out of this API? You have to stop and think about that. So that's one thing that I'm very excited about. The other is the fact that Dart's null safety will be sound. And what that means is Dart will be able to guarantee when you run your code, like if you say this is a non-nullable variable, it should never ever contain null, Dart will be able to guarantee that's true. There will never be a case where you have a non-nullable variable that holds null. And what that means is the program doesn't have to put in a lot of the runtime checks that normally come along with that situation. A lot of other languages, and I don't mean to criticize other languages, they have their own implementations. They have to still put in a runtime check to say, okay, this value is not supposed to be null. Is it really not null? I should put an if statement here. The compiler sort of sticks one in. With Dart, it won't have to do that, which means everyone's code by default is going to get faster. When you adopt non-nullability and you opt into that, we've seen some benchmarks improve by almost 20%.
Wow.
Where all these checks don't have to be in there. Yeah. So that's the other thing. It's hopefully, I believe it's going to help us write better code that's safer. We'll have fewer bugs, and it's going to be more performant code, because of the way they've implemented null safety.
Any user of a reference doesn't need to check anymore, right?
Yeah. I mean, like one thing that I really like also about null safety is, I will be honest, especially when someone comes from like Swift or Kotlin, they are like, oh, in Swift we have optionals. In Kotlin we have null types. Now I will tell, okay, what is your reason for not liking Dart now? Like you were asking for null safety. Here you go. You were asking for extension functions. Here you go. You wanted to get rid of new. Here you go. What is the next step that you want to have? Because at the end of the day, they will be running out of reasons to just basically simply hating something. So for me, it gives me a big card to just like put it back when someone asks me about null safety.
Yeah, that's one of the best things that Flutter has on its side. As far as what Flutter needs to grow is the language team. The Dart team listens to the Flutter team and listens to Flutter developers a lot. We have asked them, we've gone to them and asked them for features so many times, and they've put them in the language. Like the reason the new keyword is optional in Dart is because Flutter and Flutter developers asked for that because they were tired of writing new in all their build methods. You'd have a build method with like 20 instances of the new keyword. And they went to the Dart team and like, hey, could you take this out of the language and let us make it optional? Same with null safety. Flutter developers have been asking for that. And so they're very responsive. They're really, really good partners for both the Dart team at Google or the Flutter team at Google and the Flutter community around the world.
Yeah, and I also remember like there was a Dart conference in which they were like, oh, what if we could write mobile apps with Dart? And its watch, analytics was huge. And this also tells us about you guys actually listen and see what people actually want, and that's like the beginning of Flutter, right? More or less.
Yeah, that was back when it was still called Sky. I think if you go back, it's like 2015 or 2016, something like that. Eric Seidel back when the Flutter team was like 4 people, and it was still called Sky.
When it was only available for Android. iOS is on the way. It is coming.
Yep.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the history?
Sorry,
maybe?
go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about the history of Flutter, maybe?
Sure. I can't do the story as well as somebody like Ian Hickson, who's the tech lead, or Eric Seidel, who's the engineering director for Flutter, could tell the story. I can tell a little bit of it, though. I know that Flutter started off as an experiment in the Chrome team. So within the Chrome team, they were starting off with, they wanted to do an experiment to see how fast they could make the Chrome renderer run if they took out all the stuff that's been in the web since the 90s. So, there's all this stuff. The web has to be completely backward compatible. You can't have a web renderer that won't do something that you were allowed to do back in 1994, right? Everybody still has to implement the blink tag. And so they were like, wonder if we take all this, the stuff, the cruft, the old stuff that you used to be able to do way back when, and we just sort of redesign it the way we want to use it now, what would it be like? And so they just went in and started yanking stuff out of the code. And in the end, they had this really small, really tight renderer that improved some of their benchmarks as much as 20 times. But it wasn't useful for the web anymore, right? Because they'd taken all these old web things out of it. And they're like, well, what the heck do we do with this thing now? And they spent months on this. When do we do this? And they were like, well, maybe we could build mobile apps with it. And so they went looking for a language that they could use to build on top of it, right? Because the low-level rendering was still done in C++, I believe. And they went looking for languages, and they tested JavaScript. The very, very first version of Flutter was actually written in JavaScript. But then they found Dart. And they were like, oh, okay, this is single-threaded like JavaScript. But it can do real object-oriented stuff. It can do a lot of things that JavaScript can't. Let's try that. And then they built the widget system and the elements and the render objects on top of that rendering base that they had built. And it worked well enough that then they had to go find a name for it. So it was still called Sky at that point. So they had to go find a name for it. So they went to Google's lawyers. They were like, do we have any names we're not using for things? And they gave them all these trademarks that Google owned from other things. And one of them was Flutter. And so that's how Flutter got its name. And then they kept working on it. People kept liking it. And it just sort of kept going from there. And now here we are.
It's super funny that Flutter was actually simply a gesture recognition company, which was super weird that it goes under the dust, and all of a sudden, okay, let's build something amazing out of this. And one more time, it comes back from the grave and changes a lot of stuff, at least for the mobile and actually in general application development cycle right now in the world. Cool. So shall we continue? Yeah. Will there be Flutter tools and tutorials from Google available to designers in the near future?
So available to designers, I'm not quite sure what they mean. I mean, we certainly have, we make a ton of Flutter tools and we make a ton of Flutter tutorials and resources. Specifically for designers, it might depend on what kind of tool or resource you meant.
Like,
we do have.
If there is a code, if there is a code lab for Adobe XD, for example.
I'm sorry.
Like this. For Adobe XD, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Adobe XD, I don't know.
Oh, I see, the Adobe XD.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Certainly, we are very much enjoying our partnership with them. I know they are in a public beta, I think, at this point with their code. Normally, we wouldn't ourselves produce a resource for something like that. That would be something that we'd work with a partner and they would produce a resource for. I imagine as that plugin gets more and more stable and more close to production ready, you will start seeing those resources. I think the one thing that we do have from our team, we do have a set of material code labs that show how to not only use material with Flutter, but also customize it, which is a very important step to make it look like it's your app. Start doing things like changing the way the shapes work, changing the way the colors work, and things like that. And you can find those linked from flutter.dev on the Code Labs page. We've had those for a while, and they're very, very good resources made by the material team.
Can I translate to Turkish a little bit so our listeners can also? Alright, so evet arkadaşlar, şimdi Flutter tool'ları ve tutorial'ları olacak mı ileride Google'dan diye sordu bir arkadaşımız. Andrew'da Salih orada ne demişti? Ben o arada telefona bakıyordum.
Hocam dediler ki designerlar için tool olacak mı ya da tutorial.
Evet.
O da dedi ki şu anda olan çoğu tool daha hani erken seviyede, daha onlar tamamen olgunlaşmamış. Dolayısıyla da şu anda herhangi bir örnek yok. Yalnız siz biraz beklerseniz o tool'larda olgunlaştığı zaman zaten topluluktan kesinlikle sizin ihtiyacınız olandan daha da fazla seviyede belirli eğitici içerikler gelecektir diye cevap verdi.
Başka şirketler bizle çalışarak bir şeyler yapabilir falan dedi. Bir de sonlarda
ya onlar gelmediği sürece aynen öyle. Evet, onlar gelip istemediği sürece açıkçası onlar kod lab'lere koymayacaklarmış. Genel olarak öyle düşünebiliriz yani.
Ama işte material design ile ilgili kod lab'lerimiz var. Onları customize etmekle ilgili kod lab'lerimiz var. Oralara designer arkadaşlar bakabilir dedi.
Aynen öyle. Ya zaten hani neyse öyle bu benim cevabım olacaktı. Ben size sayayım. Pardon. I was about to answer something else by myself. Sorry.
Hey, you're an expert just as much as I am, so you should go for it.
No, okay. So next question. Okay, we already talked about briefly talked about this. I think it's null safety, but still I'm asking one more time. Which of the new features announced is your favorite at the moment?
Yeah, I would say it definitely is null safety. It's going to be a fundamental thing for everybody who uses Dart, and it's interesting. One more thing I could say on null safety. I worked on the null safety version of Dartpad, which you can find at nullsafety.dartpad.dev. You can go there right now if you want to just play with null safety and see a little bit about how it works. And it's really interesting to me how little the syntax of the language is actually changing for null safety.
Yeah.
There's only a few new pieces of syntax. There's the question mark to mark a type as nullable, because types will now, when null safety types are non-nullable by default, you have to say with a question mark that you want them to be nullable. There's that. There's an exclamation point operator that will assert that a value is not null. So if you have a nullable field, and it might be null, it might not, but you know in your code, like I know this isn't null, just pretend like it was a non-nullable. You can put the exclamation point on it. And the other is the late keyword. So they're adding a late keyword so that you can have a non-nullable field that you initialize, say, in your constructor or later in your code before it's read, and you're just telling Dart like, hey, I know this is not nullable, but I'm going to put a value in it later. So just trust me. I'm going to put a value in it before anybody reads from it. And that's it. Those are the three syntax changes, but they have such profound impacts on how people are going to code and how the language is going to work just from those three small changes. So I think that's really, really neat. And if you go to that null safety Dartpad that I mentioned, we actually have some snippets, a guided tour of snippets that'll walk you through those three things.
Cool. And I also really like the fact that, without adding a language feature, okay, it's a question mark, but if you do a null check with an if, under that you can use it just fine. And IDE also knows that, etc. That's a really nice touch that I also saw in Kotlin.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually two.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, there's actually there's a couple of ways that phenomenon you were just describing works. So the Dart tools are smart enough to know, as you said, like if you're doing an if this is null check on a nullable field, after that's done, if you like return in there, Dart knows that, well, if you got to this code, we know it's not null, and so it will promote the value to be non-nullable, and you don't have to use like guarded calls. You don't have to do that extra work anymore. Dart's like, okay, we know. And that you can do that with if checks that like throw an exception or return, and also if you start off with a field that Dart can tell will definitely get a value. They call this definite assignment. If you have a nullable field and you have like an if statement, and in every branch of that if else, there's an assignment done, Dart can follow that branching and go, okay, you get a value here, you get a value here, and you get a value here. So by the time I get down here, I know it has a value. I'm not going to treat it as nullable anymore. So there's a lot of stuff that they've been able to work into the tools like that.
That's perfect. Can't wait to work
translation
with
time.
Oh yeah,
maybe
sorry.
Translation time. Yeah, before we go to the next one.
Yeah, so let's translate.
Siz mi yapacaksınız hocam? Ben mi?
Deneyeyim bakalım. İşte null safety ile ilgili sorduk. Dedik değil mi? Hangisi favori Yeni açıklanan şeyler
Aynen.
hangisi en sevdiğin? İşte null safety dedi tabii ki, zaten demin de konuştuğumuz gibi. İşte takım çok çalıştı vesaire. Çok yakın zamanda çıkacak. İşte null safety için özel dartpad var. Şu anda denemek isterseniz orada da oynayabilirsiniz. Ben de üstüne çalıştım dedi. İşte çok language, dilde çok küçük değişiklikler yaparak bunu becerdiğlerini söyledi ve çok akıllıca. Ve de iki parçası var. Birisi işte tamam null olmuyor bunlar, ama ikincisi de performans açısından, yani compiler'da yarattığı kodda null kontrolü hiç olmadığı için artık uygulamaların %20'ye varan, yanlış hatırlamıyorsam, bir performans artmasının olacağından bahsetti. Yani bu çok ilginç. Mevcut kodunuz direkt hızlanıyor yani. Öyle bir güzelliği var. Biraz da işte yani if ile kontrol ettiyseniz null mı değil mi diye aşağıda compiler emin oluyor. Artık işte onu daha performanslı non-nullable olarak devam ediyor falan dedi. Böyle güzel noktaları var diye. Başka var mıydı bir şey Salih?
Yok, böyle gayet iyiydi hocam. Gayet iyi. Okay. Next question. What are the reasons why Flutter is a Dart-based language? Okay, I think it's like why Flutter is using Dart sort of a question. What features does Flutter Dart take advantage of? Like, basically the question is why Flutter uses Dart and what makes Dart special for Flutter? Like, which features are making it special for Flutter to be used? I think this is the question.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I think we've been answering this question the entire time I've been on the team, because people are always curious why Flutter ended up with Dart, and there are specific technical reasons. There are a zillion great languages in the world. We get asked a lot about Kotlin and whether Flutter could be used with Kotlin. And though I love Kotlin, I've done a lot of coding in it. Especially when I was back on my old team at Mobile Ads, every language has things that it's good at and things that it's not good at, right? That's why we have so many languages. And the particular things Dart is good at are the particular things that line up with Flutter. Number one, Dart can be run in an interpreted mode in a virtual machine, but it can also be run with ahead of time compilation into a native binary. And Flutter uses both of those things. When you're running in debug mode, your app is using interpreted code, or code that's compiled on the fly in a VM. It's just in time compiled. And that's what makes hot reload work, because we can send in the Flutter tool can send new code over to the running app. The virtual machine in there will be like, okay, I'll toss out this old code, I'll put this new code in place, and I'll start back up. But it can also take that same code and go, okay, I'm going to roll this release mode. I'm going to write ARM binary. I'm going to tree shake it, take out all the stuff that I know for a fact won't get called, and produce a very tight, very fast result for a release mode app. And not all languages can do that. For example, Kotlin, it's my understanding, we would not have hot reload if Flutter were built with Kotlin, because it'd be running on the JVM, and that's not something the JVM can currently do. So that's one thing that Dart provides. There are some others, like Dart, being a single-threaded language, can do garbage collection in a particularly efficient way, this is not the most interesting topic when you're first getting to know Flutter, garbage collection, but it's super important, because in Flutter, you're often building up a bunch of widgets, and then later on, you're going to toss them out, right? And Dart has multi-generational garbage collection, where because it knows it's a single-threaded language and only one thread is allowed to modify the data, that means if that thread isn't doing app code, it's not off in some part of your code, it can go garbage collect and know that nothing else is going to touch that data. So it can go in and do whatever it needs to do garbage collecting wise without having to worry about locks or anything like that, another thread coming in to modify some data. And that allows it to build up and tear down objects a lot more quickly than many other languages can do it. And that turns out that's particularly useful for Flutter. There are some other things too. I think the relationship that I mentioned earlier that Flutter has with the Dart team is so good and such a great cooperation that was another reason they felt comfortable choosing Dart, that they would be able to work with that team and evolve the language based on what Flutter developers needed. So yeah, there are a number of reasons for it. That we have an article that you can find, I think, linked from flutter.dev that goes into a few more, but it was a very, very technical choice. They had very specific technical reasons for choosing Dart.
Yeah, I will be honest. So first of all, I will do a shameless plug. I wrote an article about why actually Flutter chose Dart and about Flutter's interior architecture in Turkish. So I will share the link later on. You can check it out. it explains everything, like what is ahead of time compilation, what is just in time compilation, and why they are valuable. And for me, I will be honest, when I first started with Dart and Flutter, I was thinking, okay, like these are cool features, but as I go deeper, seeing the power of garbage collection for me was the real magic. Like, it just open DevTools, sit down and like watch how fast it like reallocates all the memory that is not used anymore, like emptying all the space, how fast it is insane. Like, at least, especially when you think about like how Flutter works and like how we can dispose, for example, widget objects easily, and like have the elements and render objects like staying for us, like how we can actually dispose these stuff. It's really important that having this strongly architectured garbage collection approach within the language, so you can feel the power exactly without draining all your memory while you just develop applications and stuff.
And my favorite part is the future streams, async await, that stuff, which I have a couple of talks about. I was really mesmerized when I started to play with it for the first time. You know, it's always like, oh, there's a stream, something, but there's like a huge API that you have to learn, etc. But here you can do an await for a stream and things like that, which, you know, makes it brilliant to code, really pleasant to code, I believe.
That's great that you've made some resources for async. I feel like it's one of those topics people never feel like they know enough about it. They never feel quite as comfortable as they want to be with the asynchronous coding patterns that Dart or other languages offer.
And your videos were very useful.
They came out of me being uncomfortable with it, not feeling like I knew it better. So I was like, what's a great way to learn this? I'll make some videos.
Yeah, it's so good. So I guess I'll translate to Turkish really quick.
Please.
Şimdi Türkçesini anlatayım. Soru şeydi işte, neden Dart dilini kullanıyor Flutter? Andrew dedi ki bu çok yani spesifik bir tercihti. Böyle rastgele yapılmış bir şey değil. Gerçekten Dart çok süper bir fit olduğu için, Flutter'a çok uyumlu olduğu için iki büyük sebebi var. Birisi işte ahead of just in time compilation yaparak işte çalışan kodun içine tak diye yeni kodu koyarak hani bir saniyenin altında hot reload yapabiliyoruz. İkincisi işte daha sonra compile edip bunu normal bir C++'la compile edilmiş bir şey gibi ship edebiliyoruz. Onları söylemişti. Başka Salih, senin aklına gelen?
Bunun dışında demişlerdi hocam. Yani tabii ki bir de garbage collection muhabbeti var. Dart'ın ciddi güçlü bir garbage collection sistemi var. Hani siz Flutter yazarken sıkça obje oluşturup objeleri aslında bir yerde kullanmamaya başlıyorsunuz. Çünkü her bir widget'i yenilediğinizde aslında objeler çöpe gitmesi gerekiyor. Bunları da temizlemezseniz tabii ki sizin memorinizde bir yük olacak bu. Bu yükü en iyi temizleyecek şekilde ayarlanmış dillerden birisi Dart. Dart gerçekten bu konuda çok güçlü. Bu da sebeplerden birisi. Bir de demişlerdi. Ya Flutter ekibinin tabii ki Dart ekibiyle aynı çatı altında olması, ondan sonra durmadan iletişim halinde olup birbirlerinin ihtiyaçlarını dinleyerek dili ona göre şekillendirmeleri de çok önemli bir sebepti. Bu yüzden de bu da üçüncü sebep olarak düşünülebilir.
Bir de single threaded olması da önemli demişti. Çünkü belli noktalarda hiçbir kontrol yapmıyorsunuz. Kimsenin o datayı bozmayacağından eminsiniz. Tek bir thread olduğu için o da bir avantaj demişti. Evet.
Aynen.
Birçok dilde bunları bulamadıkları için Dart süper oldu ve Dart da buna göre de evrildiği için zaten tam bunun için olmuş oldu sonunda. Evet.
Aynen öyle oldu hocam. Devam edin istiyorsanız. Siz
okay. Ama soru kaçtı. Okay, let me ask the next question then. This time. Next question: how can we add our apps to flutter.com/showcase? How can we get our app in the Flutter website?
Oh wow. I don't think there's actually a process for that. I think it's something that the team at Flutter, they sort of noticed an app and they reach out to people. I don't know if there's a process for that. I can tell you one other great place too that you can definitely get your apps up that is a showcase, which is itsallwidgets.com. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that one. That is the one we use it all the time. That is also a showcase for Flutter apps, and Hillel Koren runs it, and he is always looking for great Flutter apps to add to his showcase. But as far, I don't think we have any sort of set thing. There are some programs where we are doing more to recognize people building great things outside of Google with Flutter or for Flutter. For example, there's now the Flutter Favorites program for packages and plugins, which y'all may know a little bit about. And that's an area where you can say, hey, look, I'd like to be marked as a Flutter favorite and have a lot of people trust my package and know that it's been sort of approved and marked as trustworthy by the Flutter team. And there are specific criteria for that, I believe, that it has to be maintained well, has to conform to documentation standards and some stuff like that. So there are definitely ways that the team is trying to do a little bit more to recognize all of the great things that people are writing and creating. But I don't know if that particular page has those sorts of processes built around it. I think it's a little bit more custom than that, if that makes sense.
I guess as Flutter is becoming more and more important, people will be asking this question more and more. Maybe it's time to do something.
Yeah.
But I will say, I will say one thing that I would definitely want people to know is, because this happens for us with like our samples repo, for example. Someone will write a sample application for Flutter, and they'll want it to be in what they think is the official samples repo. And what I always tell people in those situations is, just because something is done at Google or with Googlers doesn't make it more official than something done with Flutter by anybody else. Flutter it's an open source project. It's built by people all over the world. There are hundreds of people committing to the SDK repo and thousands of people building resources and plugins and things like that. And the fact that somebody works at Google or doesn't mean their stuff is any less well built or useful as something built by somebody at Google. So don't think that showcase is the place to go to know about great Flutter apps. There are a bunch of them. There's, like I said, there's It's All Widgets. There's Awesome Flutter and things like that. There are people out there with more stars on their GitHub repo than the Flutter samples repo. And so.
Yeah, so I'll just go to Turkish now.
Yeah, please. That was a lot. Yeah.
I'll do my best. Şimdi bu sayfaya bir yöntemimiz yok diye hatırlıyorum. Hani birileri bir uygulama görüyor, ya koyalım mı koymayalım mı diyor, hatırladığım kadarıyla diyor. Yani şu an bir proses yok diyor. Ama söyledi mesela PubDev'deki çeşitli package'lar için bir şey vardı, ismini şimdi unuttum. Flutter Favorites diye bir pub package'lar için bir şeyimiz var. Orada daha düzgün bir proses var ama burada yok. Ama yani burası illa en iyi uygulamalar burada diye düşünmeyin. itsallwidgets.com diye bir site var. Flutter Awesome var. Buralara hani kendinizi koyabilirsiniz. Oralarda olması lazım diyor. Daha girmek kolaydır falan. Mesela Google'un içinden de yapanlar oluyor diyor. Flutter example'larına ben kod yazdım. Bunu Flutter example'lara koy diyenler oluyor. Biz onları reject ediyoruz, reddediyoruz. Çünkü sen Google'cısın diye hani iyi burada olması gerekmiyor falan gibisinden. Hani Flutter open source projedir, tüm dünyaya açıktır falan filan dedi. Ama sorunun cevabı böyle bir şey yok şu anda. Hani buraya nasıl konulur gibi bir metod yok.
Cool. Next question, maybe.
Yes, we can get the next question.
Gazian, maybe you had a question about async await or something like this. Maybe you can ask.
So it's going to be a long diversion. Maybe we can get the next question.
Okay.
Since it's already here.
Okay.
Do you want to read it? Or?
Okay, I can do it. It's totally fine. So, are there any news on making games with Flutter or releasing Flutter apps to the gaming consoles?
About Flutter apps on gaming consoles, I have not heard anything about.
May I jump in something? What I heard is, I think there will be a support on Xbox from the Flutter side. After, I think like 2 weeks ago or something, after the news was about desktop, it was possible to actually have Flutter running on Xbox with the upcoming, let's say, versions. Like everybody was super excited about it, like how we can run Flutter on actually Xbox. So about the consoles, I don't know about PlayStation or something, but especially with the Windows support happening recently with the Surface Pro and stuff, and I'm like super excited to hear about this as well. It was really, really amazing that actually we can develop our Flutter apps and run it on Xbox One or whatever version people has.
İstersen bunu sen çevir.
Okay, I just want to give one answer as well. Like about making games, like one thing I really like about Flutter is you have control over all of the pixels that you have on your device. So if you want to make a game, use your imagination and the power of animations in Flutter, and you can actually make it. There are also really nice tools like sprite tools called like Flame, and they really work really nice as retro gaming tools. But in general, it's working like a gaming engine. You can think it like this. You have control over all the pixels. You just need to think about the possible animations and you can do it. Like I've seen Simon doing retro games even without Flame or stuff, basically just using simple animations, which is quite cool. Anyway, now I will translate what I said. So şimdi arkadaşlar geçenlerde işte Microsoft'un belirli açıklamaları oldu. Surface Pro ile ilgili falan da zaten destek gelmeye başlamıştı Flutter'a. Bununla birlikte de bunun iki cihazın yapısı birbirine benzediği için Xbox üzerinde de aslında Flutter uygulamalarını derleyebileceğimizi gördük. Birkaç versiyon düzelmesi gerekiyor ama birkaç versiyon sonrasında yani gerçekten minor fixler sonrasında aslında Xbox cihazlar üzerinde çalıştırabileceğiz Flutter uygulamalarımızı. Bu büyük bir şey. Konsollar üzerinde sadece o var. Hani PlayStation falan yok maalesef. Bir de oyunlarla ilgili retro gaming falan seviyorsanız Flame diye bir paket var. Bunu kullanarak retro oyunlar yapabilirsiniz. Bir de zaten Flutter oyun motoru gibi çalışıyor. Yani her bir piksel üzerinde sizin kontrolünüz var. Dolayısıyla siz kendi hayal gücünüzü kullanarak aslında animasyonların gücünü ortaya koyup oyunlar oluşturabilirsiniz. Yani pek çok oyun var. Web site falan var. Mariano'nun yaptığı oyun var mesela. Hem webde, desktop'ta ve telefonda çalışan gayet güzel şeyler var yani şu aşamada. Cool. That's all.
So I guess there was another question that they told me to ask before. So for the very beginners, do they have to learn Dart before Flutter? And knowing which languages would be helpful in getting started with Flutter and Dart?
I don't think you have to spend a lot of time learning Dart on its own before starting to learn Flutter. I know I didn't learn that way. I sort of dove in with both Dart and Flutter at once. It might be a good idea to spend a couple of hours going through some of the Dart resources just to make sure that you understand the main language features. We have some Dart code labs, for example, that use Dartpad to do interactive learning exercises. And I might say, take an hour or two and do that, but I don't think you'd need to like build a command line Dart app to get used to Dart and then go work with Flutter or anything like that. I think Flutter is a great way to get used to doing Dart code and to learn how classes and objects work in Dart and things like that.
Okay.
May I ask a follow-up question about this?
Sure.
What would you recommend to a beginner if they want to learn Flutter? Like, what would you say? Okay, if I were you, I would start from this point, go onwards. Okay, forget about the Dart part. We talked about Dart, but just talk about the Flutter part. What would you recommend from your perspective and your experience so far?
Sure. I would, everybody, there are a million ways to get started with Dart and Flutter. So this is just one of them that you might suggest, but I would say to do two things. One is to find some other people that are interested in Dart and Flutter. One of the best things about Flutter is that it's built by a community and it's, it has this community of people building with it around it. Obviously you all know about that more than anyone. You're community organizers and you're putting on this event to help people and things like that. And so I would say, if you're interested, find a local meetup, find a group of people that are building with Flutter and get to know them, because odds are they'd love to help you learn. And the other thing I would say is we just got done doing a whole bunch of rewrites and new code labs, and they're a great resource for people getting started. We have them on Dart, so you can go to dart.dev and see the Dart code labs. You can go to flutter.dev, and there's a whole menu of code labs from things like how do I build my first Flutter app all the way up to how do I build for desktop, how do I connect to Firebase, how do I build for the web specifically and do a web plugin and things like that. And you could probably spend a day going through half a dozen of those or 8 or 9 of them even. And that would be a great way to really get your feet wet, as we say, with Dart and Flutter.
So I'll try to
And,
translate it now. Or
okay.
did you say something?
Okay.
Mhm.
I just want to ask one last thing. Like from the boring show, we are seeing that sometimes even, let's say, Googlers, the people who are actually literally working on Flutter, is sometimes having a hard time to remember stuff. So beginners always should always keep in mind that the information is something that can be forgotten easily, right? They should always remember that they need to make simple research and keep digging instead of getting discouraged about stuff. Because I mean, like, I'm sure everybody has this moment that they feel discouraged, right? About this technology or something. Like, at least from the from a, let's say, Googler's perspective, what would you say to the beginners if they feel discouraged to learn something?
I would say the process of being a programmer is the process of continually learning and thinking about realizing that you don't know the thing that you wish you knew. That is certainly the case. I spend time every day Googling how to do things just like everybody else. And I'm on the Flutter team, looking up things in the docs and things like that. So don't feel, if you're a beginner and you're like, oh, there's so much that I don't know, so much I have to learn. The state of being in a position, the state of needing to learn things is the state you're going to be in for the rest of your career as a coder. It's just what the job is. So that's just normal. So don't feel bad. That means if you feel like you need to learn something, it just means you're doing the job right.
Cool. I'm done. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Now Türkçe söylüyorum. Dart öğrenmek zorunda değilsiniz. Yani tutup da başından sonuna kadar Dart öğrenmeye çalışmayın dedi. İşte 1 saat falan harcasanız yeter. Code-Lab'lar var Dart'la ilgili Flutter'ın sitesinde dedi. Onunla birazcık zaman harcasanız, class nedir vesaire biraz şey yapın. Sonra direkt olarak Flutter'a dalıp da hani bilmediğiniz şeylere sonradan bakabilirsiniz. Öyle öğrenebilirsiniz dedi. Salih dedi ki işte discourage, böyle beceremedim öf bırakıyorum falan moduna girerseniz ne tavsiye edersiniz dedi öyle düşünenler için. Andrew dedi ki ya ben Flutter takımında çalışıyorum, ben bile her gün Google'lıyorum her şeyi, doktora bakıyorum vesaire. Hani hiç developer adam sürekli öğrenir, sürekli bakar. Bizim olayımız bu dedi. Biraz bir şey eksik kaldıysa bilmiyorum.
Bir de işte Flutter kaynağı sormuştuk hocam. Hani o da dedi. Neydi onun adı? Sizin bulunduğunuz yerde Flutter öğrenmek isteyen insanları bulun. O insanları bir araya gelip bir şeyler yapın dedi.
Evet, insanlarla beraber.
Evet.
Okay, so we have one last question, if you have time still, Andrew.
Sure.
I'm holding you up, sorry. So, are you thinking to support Airbnb's Lottie and password autofill for mobile platforms, especially on iOS, they say? I don't know what these are.
These are specific enough that I may not be able to answer them as well as some other people would. I know we've gotten asked about Lottie a lot, and I think there is a package or a plugin out there that's not maintained by the Flutter team to do those files. I know that people have had a lot of success with the tools built by Flare. Well, they used to be called Flare, now they're called Rive. And so those are definitely supported, and they do a lot of things that Lottie is meant to do on native Android and iOS. I would imagine if you go to Pub and do a search for Lottie, you'll find whatever effort is going on there. And it might be a good opportunity to contribute as well. If you're really interested in support for Lottie files, maybe that's an area that you can help the community out. About password autofill, I'm afraid I don't know. I know we just got done doing Apple sign-in and making sure there was a plugin for that so people could do sign-in with Apple. I don't know about password autofill for mobile platforms. I will say, though, the team is constantly looking for input about what matters most to Flutter developers. And so if you want that particular feature for Flutter, that autofill feature, I'm sure there's already a GitHub issue open for it in the Flutter repo. Go find that issue and just give it a thumbs up and say, hey, this matters to me. This is affecting the app that I want to build with Flutter. I would really love this feature. They listen to those numbers for like thumbs up and comments. They go right into the meetings where they prioritize what's going to get done. The SDK team listens a lot because, I mean, the mission, as it were, for the team is to build something that's useful for everybody. So if everybody shows up and says, hey, this would be useful for us, they're going to listen. So.
Yeah, so let me try it in Turkish now. Evet arkadaşlar, şimdi bu Lottie ve Pastor Autofill emin değilim dedi. Galiba Lottie ile ilgili bir pub package'i var. Pub'dan ararsanız büyük ihtimal çıkar dedi. Hani siz de contribute edebilirsiniz dedi. Ama hani official bir şey yok dedi hatırladığım kadarıyla. Pastor Autofill konusunda da emin olamadı. Eğer hani uygulamanızda böyle bir şey gerekiyorsa illaki bir GitHub reposunda Flutter'ın bir issue vardır. Oraya girin, thumbs up verin. Bu thumbs up'lar bizim toplantılarımızda direkt sıralıyoruz thumbs up'lara göre falan. Hani neyin önemli olduğunu insanlar için. Hani uygulama yazacağım, bu lazım bana diye oraya yazın, thumbs up verin. Ona göre biz bunları öne alıyoruz dedi. Bu tür şeyleri siz de contribute edebiliyorsunuz falan dedi. Böyle.
Cool. Okay, so yes, first of all, thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, we are having surprise.
Yes.
Ilker, hi.
It's me, and that was just a fantastic session, and thank you very much, Andrew. We know it's very early where you are on the other side of the world, and it is great. Obviously, the Flutter love is all around the world, and it is great to see you. And thanks for on behalf of all the communities. We know that obviously you've been speaking at other communities as well, and the Flutter community and the Google communities are eternally grateful to have you on this channel. And we would really love to host you in person in the future. Obviously, when the world becomes a better place in terms of whatever is happening right now. We thank you very, very much, and I really hope that your participation in this stream actually propels Flutter to new heights.
Well, thank you so much for having me. My favorite thing in the world is talking to people about Dart and Flutter. So this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic. Yeah. And Salih Agazian, thank you very much for the kind translations, asking the questions, putting your comments on whatever, as Andrew has actually already provided us very kindly. So this has been really, really great. Sizlere de dinlediğiniz için çok teşekkür ederiz. Tabii ki çevirerek burada sizlere olabildiği kadar katkıda bulunmaya çalıştık. Andrew'un cevaplarını olabildiğince sizlere aktarmaya çalıştık. Tabii ki bu yayının tekrarını izleyebilirsiniz. Salih Gazian, Google Developer Expertler olarak Dart ve Flutter konusunda sizlere çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Andrew, again, thank you very much for taking the time at this early hour, and we would love to see you in future events.
I would love to come and visit. That would be wonderful.
Fantastic.
Thank you so
much.
You'll
be more than welcome. Thank you very much.